point of view. We think of adoption, we think of going to Africa or China or going somewhere and finding some kid that's no blood relation to us, bringing them into our family and legally adopting them. What if we were a first century Jew?
Be more like a bar mitzvah.
Be more like a bar mitzvah. And even today, many Jews still practice this. When their son, when their child becomes of age, I think a common age is about 12 years old, they do what's called a bar mitzvah. They adopt their own child. They bring their child and place him as son. In the olden days, the bar mitzvah or the adoption is a beautiful picture of it's Jacob and Esau. Remember what happened with Jacob and Esau? There was a birthright that was to be passed down to the next generation. And Esau was in line to inherit it. But what did he do? He forfeited. He sold it for a bowl of soup to satisfy a pleasure of the flesh. Which, by the way, that teaches us something. We can sell our birthright. We can't sell our salvation. We can sell our birthright for the satisfaction of the flesh. So what happened? Jacob was brought in before his father, and his father gave him this blessing, which included three things. What three things did it include? Rulership, priesthood, and a double portion. And when Esau finally realized what he had done, he said he went out and wept bitterly because he realized what took place. So this passage of Scripture, it says, for those that are being led by the Spirit of God have received the spirit of adoption or sonship. In other words, the ones that are being led by the Spirit of God have an understanding, hey, there's an adoption out ahead, and that's what we're living by. That's what we're looking for. It says, whereby we cry, Abba, Father. But look at verse 16. The Spirit bears witness with our spirit that we are what?
Children of God.
Right. We're all children of God. It says, and if children, then heirs. Heirs of God. So all the children of God, all God's people, everyone that's ever been born into God's family are what's called heirs of God. But look at the rest of the verse. It says, and joint heirs with Christ, if so be we suffer with him. All children are heirs of God. But only those that suffer with Christ, that are faithful with Christ, are going to be joint heirs with Christ. So that we may also be glorified together. He says, I reckon that the suffering of this present time are not worthy to be compared to the glory which shall be revealed in us. It says, for the earnest expectation of the creation, and that's the creation as we know it. That's the whole world. Look at it. It says it waits for the manifestation of what? The sons of God. See, one day, the sons of God that are in order now are going to be cast out, and a new order of sons are going to be brought in. And the whole creation, the entire world, is waiting for that. Let's keep looking. It says, for the creation was made subject to vanity, not willingly, but by reason of him who has subjected the same in hope, because the creation itself also shall be delivered from the bondage of corruption into the glorious liberty of the children of God.
What verse are you on?
That was verse 21. In verse 22 it says, for we know that the whole creation groans and travails in pain together until now, and not they only, but ourselves also, which even have the first fruits of the Spirit, even we ourselves groan within ourselves, waiting for the adoption. The adoption hasn't taken place yet. The adoption is future. When's the adoption going to take place? What's that?
During the wedding feast?
Possibly. Sometime after the judgment seat of Christ. Because the judgment seat of Christ is going to determine who walked according to the Spirit and who walked according to the flesh. And what is the Bible? It's in verse 14, what does it say? Those who are being led by the Spirit of God, those are the sons of God. Hasn't been manifested yet, hasn't been revealed yet, but those are the ones that are going to replace Satan and his angels. So, let's go back. I know that was a long way to determine who the sons of God are. But back to Genesis chapter 6. There's just absolutely no way possible to make these sons of God human beings.
You know, I've always heard that it was like the great people like Moses and whatever. You know, the great leaders of the time.
It just look. I mean, first of all, if you compare the rest of the Scripture with the term "the sons of God," it just doesn't fit. The sons of God are referred to special created beings in positions of authority. But if you look at the text itself, it came to pass when men began to multiply on the face of the earth that daughters were born unto them. Now, when it says men in verse 1, nowhere can you read into that that's referring only to the godly line of Seth. It's man, it's mankind. It's the people that were on the earth. And then when you get to verse 2 and it says that the sons of God saw the daughters of men, that they were fair, and they took them wives of all which they chose. So you have a comparison between the sons of God and the daughters of men. Man was a generic term. It's a general term including all of the people on the earth. And you're comparing that with the sons of God. It's got to be talking about something different. So you're dealing with a human race and an angelic race. You're dealing with two different groups of beings. Some people have a hard time with this because it says they took them wives of all which they chose. And remember the passage in Matthew, I believe it's in chapter 21 or 22, where the Sadducees were confronting Jesus about the resurrection and saying, hey, you know, this man who had a wife and she died, so she took another wife and she died. And so, or maybe it was backwards, maybe it was a wife and the husband died. But he said, so who's going to be, you know, the wife in the resurrection? And Jesus said, well, in the resurrection they'll be like the angels, who neither marry or are given in marriage. Well, that may be God's intended design for angels, that they don't marry, but we know that a bunch of angels went against God's will, and it's very possible that these angels said, hey, you know, I know we're not supposed to marry, God didn't give us marriage, but we're going to.
They were disciples of Lucifer.
Exactly. So that argument really doesn't hold water. So they saw the daughters of men, and they took wives of all which they chose. Let's look at a couple passages of Scripture that discuss this very thing. Let's look at the book of Jude.
Did you say Jude?
Jude, right before the Revelation.
Which chapter of Jude is that?
Ha ha.
That's a big chapter.
I'm going to read from the NIV because the King James really, it doesn't translate the way that this 6 and 7's really reading. So from the NIV, the Jude verse 6 says, and the angels who did not keep their positions of authority but abandoned their own home, these he has kept in darkness, bound with everlasting chains for judgment on the great day. In a similar way, Sodom and Gomorrah and the surrounding towns gave themselves up to sexual immorality and perversion. They serve as an example of those who suffer the punishment of eternal fire. Well, I don't like that either. The King James, it says that It says, giving themselves over to fornication and going after strange flesh.